Hello everyone, and happy start of June. I am very excited today to announce that I have just completed the biggest project of my life. Now you might say, wait a second, didn't you already announce this 3 years ago? Now for those of you who have been following me at least 3 years or who have just seen my channel trailer, you might remember the video that I made where I made the exact same claim. So have I done something different this time? Is there going to be something even longer and more detailed than my ancestry of Elizabeth II, or maybe something longer than my 3.5 hour Reformation documentary? Well, yes and no. So many of you will remember that I embarked on an enormous project that took me 2 years to complete, and this is where I did research on the full ancestry of Queen Elizabeth II. But there are a couple of things that are problems. First one being that, well, Queen Elizabeth is no longer with us. Rest in peace. I already made a tribute video, so you can go check that out. But much more importantly, although I was really proud of my work, and as I said, it took 2 years to complete, it turns out that it was not actually as accurate as I thought. I made a claim in the last time, in the last video, not literally the last video, but last time I made a video about this, that it was 98 to 99% accurate. That is not accurate, actually. So then what changed? Well, it all started in September of last year. So one day I was waking up to go to work and I stumbled across a video that really caught my attention. And it was, well, would Charlemagne today be considered French or German? And so obviously, with my knowledge of Charlemagne, with my knowledge of Frankish history, I was like, this is a very cool topic. So I decided to watch it, and let me just say I was pretty shocked, because turns out it would be neither, or, well, it's complicated. Now, I won't go too much into the video because that's not the point of it, but the point that I'm making when referencing this video is that it caused me to reconsider all the work that I had done. Because essentially what I realized is, while in my old project I basically just put the Franks as French, because after all, France is named after the Franks, and their most of their territory, or at least their core territory, was in France. I realized that actually when you look at it culturally and genetically, the Franks are actually the ancestors of the Dutch, not of the French or the Germans. And so then I started asking myself, what other ancient peoples had I misapplied modern ethnicities to, and what should I do about it? So, due to that, I decided that there needed to be a change. So, with this new knowledge, I came to the unfortunate realization that I had to redo the entire project. Now, even though most of these Frankish ancestors involved were quite literally somewhere around 40 generations back, and therefore would basically make no meaningful difference on the final outcome, I did realize that a lot of these small mistakes could compound over time and give inaccurate results. And so even though the results that you'll be seeing in this upcoming series are not going to be that much different, there will be some significant changes, and that's why I thought it was worth redoing. But speaking of doing that, though, as you can imagine, it took a really long time, and I was honestly prepared to take another 2 years. Now, luckily for you guys, it didn't take 2 years. As I said, I started doing this in September, and it is now June, and so in reality, it only took me about 8 months to actually redo, and then I spent another month sort of just finishing the final touches and writing the script. But there was one important thing that I changed, and that is that I decided, well, I've already done Elizabeth, why not just do King Charles as well? Because after all, I actually had the insane opportunity to actually get to see King Charles very recently. He came over to my hometown in Ottawa, and I was not going to miss out this opportunity. And so given that Charles was already relevant, and of course he has been the current monarch for a while, I decided to just include him. And luckily, there wasn't very much new research involving him, because turns out that royal families like incest a lot. And so basically, almost all the ancestors on his maternal side are the exact same ones as the ones on his paternal side. And so there you go. That is basically the main update, that I have now redone the entire research on the ancestry of Elizabeth II, plus added some new research for King Charles. But now, for those of you who are new or who do not remember what I did last time, you might be asking, okay, this is all cool, but can you actually explain what this consists of? What is your research method? So essentially, what I did is that when I say I looked up all of the king or queen's ancestry, I do not mean this literally. Of course, we don't have records on every single one of them, and of course you could go back infinite generations, but I am talking about every single ancestor that I could find on Wikipedia. So that, just so you know, is a lot of ancestors. You can just look at this document over here. The link will be in the description, and it is insanely long, but also insanely interesting. So you could basically Command F any noteworthy European and see if they made it to this list. You might be surprised by what kind of ancestors, or I shouldn't say what kind of ancestors, but what interesting ancestors have been on this list. So now I will explain a little bit though how I actually do the research. So after finding all of these different ancestors, what I do then is I go the furthest back that I can until there is no known records of, or at least there's no page or no known record of their parents, and then I look at where that person is from, and from there I will start with the ethnicity estimate. So for example, let's imagine that there is a German ancestor from, let's say, the 8th century, and we know they're from Germany, and we know their parents are from Germany. We might know their names, but there's no pages on them, and there's nothing further back. So in that case, I would write down that person as 100% German. But you might obviously think, hey, well, aren't there people whose ethnicity was ambiguous or unknown? In which case, that is definitely the case, and I did my best to guess as accurately as I possibly could, because of course we cannot have completely accurate data on everyone. For example, one very famous ancestor who I will be mentioning here is Rolo. That is the Viking leader who came over and founded Normandy. But notice how I said Viking and nothing more, because we don't know where specifically he came from. We know he was Norse, but we don't know if he was Norwegian, Danish, or Swedish. And so because of that, I just had to do my best to sort of guess from the circumstances where he would be from, and then from there use that as a baseline for his future descendants. And so I am not going to be as bold as I was last time. I'll say that this project is probably somewhere around maybe 95% accurate, but I do think this is easily and explicitly the most detailed research on royal ancestry on the internet, and I have not been aware of anyone who's done anything close to this. But you might say, okay, what inspired you to do this in the first place? Which is something I mentioned in the first video, but I forgot to mention it here up until now. This all started actually back in January 2020 when I got a video recommended to me by Useful Charts about what if Elizabeth II took a DNA test. And I thought it was a really interesting idea. I went through all of it, and it was good, but there was one thing that really stood out to me, where he basically said that he was only going back 10 generations because before then it becomes statistically insignificant. And he's generally right. I mean, basically, if you have the ancestors, all the ancestors 10 generations back, you can almost accurately predict what the current results would be, at least on a DNA test. But there are going to be certain older ancestors whose will be spread among different lineages, but who will have a source further back than 10 generations. And so that is what caused me to go down this insane rabbit hole. But here we are, 5.5 years later, and I am proud to say that I have created probably the most accurate royal, not genealogy per se, but I guess royal ancestry research that there is. So if this excites you, if this interests you, or if maybe you just want to learn a little bit more, well, be sure to stay for this upcoming series where I will be going over the most important ancestors of the royal family, and then I will finally present the results at the end. So once again, thank you all for watching. I will put the research in the description. If you have any questions, of course, don't forget to ask me about it in the comments, and I will see you next time for the series. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Goodbye.